Hi there. In the previous video, we looked at join clause that allow us to join data from relational tables. In this video, we will explore an alternative approach of how we can get data from relational tables using prefetch. And what is the difference between using join clause? Let's get started. First of all, what is the difference between join and prefetch? The core difference is that when using join clause, the data from the table being joined on will not be prefetched by result set. The table being joined will only be used at the time of building the query behind the scenes, meaning if we need to access joined relational data on our result instance, then DBIx will do additional query behind the scenes to fetch the required data. Whereas when we use prefetch clause, the relational data will be used at the time of building query behind the scenes and always be pre-populated on our result instance. Alright, that's a lot of theory. Let's look at some examples of what we discussed. Now, first of all, let's build out a previous case where we use join condition to fetch the relational data on our user result and by accessing nodes. So as before, we can say my user, we know we're going to be fetching the first user result, equals schema result set, and we want to access the user. On that, we call the search result set method. And what we want to look for is nodes where user ID, let's say, equals 1. And the second parameter, we want to say that we want to join. And the thing we want to join, of course, is the nodes. And then we just say that we want to access all. All right, so that looks good. So if we save that and add DBIx, trace for SQL debugging, Perl, include our libraries, and run the scripts, we're going to see our original query, but that's not very useful at this time. What we're really after is seeing what happens if we try to access the nodes. So what we can do, we can say my at nodes equals user, we access the nodes. And what we can do now, we can say current context, description of a node for each node that we fetched. All right, so we're getting the user result. We are getting all the node results, storing them in a list, and then just looping through them and printing out the description. If we run this again, we're going to see that, as before, we get results from the user table, we join the nodes, just apply our SQL conditions, and that's our first part of the query. And the second part is, if we try to access the nodes, we can see that we are running the second query. If I comment this out quickly, rerun the script, you're going to see that we are only running the first part. Now let's try to use prefetch and let's see what changes. So if I uncomment back accessing the nodes and printing out the description, and all we need to do, we just need to change join to prefetch. Oops, so that is prefetch. All right, if we save that. And just a note here, you can also prefetch data in nested format, the same as join. It's exactly the same. All right, so with that only single change in place where we are replacing join with prefetch, let's rerun the script. And now what we're going to see is that we only ran the first part of the query. And you might notice here that DBIx is also adding all the information about nodes on our original query. So now when we try to access the nodes on the user result, we don't see the second query to fetch the node data through additional SQL statement. Everything was done in a single query, and that's why you see in this SQL that all the columns and all the data that we defined in prefetch is going to be prefetched on the main query. And that's why DBIx doesn't need to reach out to database again. And that's really the core difference between join and prefetch. However, this of course begs a question, when should we be using join over prefetch and vice versa? Well, as always, it depends. When using join, you need to keep in mind that DBIx will make multiple queries behind the scenes to fetch the relational data if you need it later on. When using prefetch, you are potentially loading a lot of data in memory you might not need. My advice is to always build for the current minimal use case, meaning if you need relational data only to filter conditions in the query built by DBIx, then go with join. Otherwise, if you know that you will need to access relational data on the result instance, then go with prefetch clause to avoid unnecessary queries. As I said before, you can always rewrite your join conditions to prefetch, and of course vice versa, if your use case changes in the future. But remember, do evaluate what is the less expensive and more efficient approach in your scenario. It's all about finding the perfect balance between memory, bandwidth usage, and the time penalty of potentially doing multiple round trips. So to say, finding the lesser evil. Alright, that's it for this video. We looked at prefetch and what is the difference between join, and we also briefly discussed when you should be using one over the other. I hope you found this video useful, and I'll see you at the next one.